Every board is asking their head of marketing, what's our AI strategy? Over 50% of the content referenced by the LLMs was published in the last 90 days with LLMs. Today is what matters. I might get less traffic, but my conversion rates are dramatically higher, which makes sense. AI is answering questions. It's moving people down the funnel.
Hello, everybody, and we are back on this episode. We have a very special guest. His name is Todd Sawicki, and today we're going to talk all about AI SEO and how to actually show up on the LLMs, right? On ChatGPT, on Perplexity, on all these chatbots. So, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Todd. Todd, thank you so much for being here. If you could just start by maybe just introducing yourself and let everybody know how awesome you are.
Ha! Thank you. Don't say that in front of my kids; they might throw up on themselves. But thank you for the kind words. I'm Todd. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Gumshoe, and been a long time marketing tech startup person who's been thinking about things like customer acquisition and how do you do that, especially from the perspective of paid. But what's interesting, of course, now is we're seeing an incredible shift of traffic, of consumer interest away from traditional search into AI and these new platforms. And as a result, marketers are beginning to realize more and more traffic is coming from AI. And as a result, less traffic is coming from things like Google. And so they might have to do things differently. And so now we're thinking and trying to help marketers better understand this new world of AI and AI search.
It's really fascinating, especially anything revolving AI is always changing really quickly. I think if we could just start off by kind of just defining, like, there is a lot of terms in this space, and I'm sure a lot of people are confused what is the next thing. So maybe if we could start off by like just figuring out like what is AEO, GEO, AISO, LLM SEO.
Yeah,
It's like
it's
a whole
it's a good
alphabet, right?
it's a great discussion. I don't think we have a perfect term, right? Obviously, SEO, search engine optimization, where this starts, and then some other terms have been thrown around that people, to your point, might have seen and understand. There's GEO, which stands for Generative Engine Optimization. I'm not the biggest fan of that because it sounds like geo-targeting. From a paid side, if you start throwing out the terms GEO, it sounds like geo, you might be confusing marketers, non-search marketers who might be thinking, wait, you're talking about geo-targeting? And then there's AEO, which stands for Answer Engine Optimization. And so that's another one. And that doesn't quite roll off the tongue. I think SEO always worked great because it was easy to say and what have you. And AEO, I feel like, and especially some other languages, would be AEO, or AO is how you might say it in other like Roman dialects, which would be kind of a pain in to say. And then we kind of prefer AIO as in AI optimization. And then you'll see, like LMSO, which means LMM search optimization. And so they all kind of mean the same thing, which is this new thing of consumers using AI and LLMs. And LLMs, by the way, for those not familiar, it stands for large language models. That's more specifically the thing that is driving the answers behind the AI platforms, right? The model is fundamentally what they use to figure out how to answer questions and do things. And then there's other terms you might hear too, which is another one that'll come up is RAG. And RAG is the three-letter acronym that refers to a real-time augmented generation, which basically is a real fancy way of saying that's the real-time search protocol that the LLMs use. Because what happened traditionally is LLMs work by what they do is they basically consume all the public information they can, and and the model gets trained, meaning it compiles all the relationships between words and data and what have you to kind of understand what is happening. And from there, they answer questions. Now, what happened, so what they would do is take a snapshot of the internet that was like 6, 12, or 18 months out of date, and they train for months. It would basically consume thousands and thousands of CPUs or GPUs, graphical processing units, which are old graphics cards for us hardcore gamers used to go out and buy NVIDIA cards just to run first-person shooters like Grand Theft Auto. But now that same tech is actually used to train AI. And so what happens is they would train themselves on the internet and they could answer questions based upon what they saw. But the problem is if you train on information that's 6, 12, 18 months out of date, your answers aren't up to date. So what the models have now figured out how to do is they now do real-time internet search to augment, that's the augmentive comment of the A part of RAG, their training data. So what they'll do is the AI, when you ask them a question, if they don't feel like they've got a current up-to-date answer, it will do real-time internet search to augment its training data set. And so that's the other piece that's starting to happen. And kind of adding that is really what caused, I really think, AI search to take off, is suddenly it could be up to date and extremely helpful and knowledgeable in answering long, complex questions. So I think that's been the big thing. In our opinion, this might be an interesting point, is why is AI search kind of taking off? In our opinion, it's solving a lot of the problems of traditional search. It handles complex queries better. It gives you more of what you're looking for. How many times have we tried to ask a complex question in Google and you end up scrolling page after page after page, and all you see is top 10 this and top 10 that. And so I think that's been one of the interesting things to think about, is these differences and what's changing in AI search and why is it better. And I think as we analyze AI search, and I'm happy to sort of share some stats about what drives that, you really start to see that point, which is AI search is becoming just a much better user experience. And as a result, that's what's really driving interest in this. It's not some made up thing by AI. It's that it makes lives better for consumers or the end users.
It's really fascinating, and I'm sure like that's the number one question that people have when they hear about this, is how do you actually get featured? Like, how do you get discovered by AI, and how do you become recommended?
It's a very interesting question, and I think the biggest thing is AI loves information. And so I think from the perspective of how you want to appear, you have to be you have to provide information, and that's kind of step one. And the second step is make sure that information is crawlable. We're surprised as we work with brands. You go to their robots.txt file and they're blocking AI. Well, I've heard that you shouldn't give information to the crawlers and you should block certain things, whether it's Google or AI. We don't know what it is. And it's kind of surprising because you think, oh, first step is, yes, make sure it's not blocked. Make sure the AI crawlers have access to your site. The second thing is, as I was going earlier, I was just saying, in terms of make sure your site has information. It has long form content. AI, what's great about AI is it's a machine. It can read as many words as you want. It's not a human. It doesn't have the attention span of a flea. It doesn't need these 6-second jump cuts like everything else. And AI loves long form information, very detailed information. And so make sure you've got lots of facts and figures throughout your site. And I think the last thing is you want to make sure that you're helping answer questions. It loves Q&A. And therefore, it's a much bigger emphasis on, are you providing answers to the questions that AI thinks are related to your business? And I think that's kind of the most basic fundamental thing. Make sure you can get crawled, make sure you've got lots of information on your sites, and then 3, really hone in on Q&A content in a way that maybe you haven't traditionally. I mean, think of how many FAQs you've read where it's very plain vanilla and they're very short and pithy and they're not really doing much. It's almost the most basic things. Whereas with AI, they love much more long form, detailed answers, and as many as you can think of and answer. I think that's kind of step one for everyone, is you can look in the mirror at yourself. And then there's other strategies you can get into in terms of offsite and other things. But the first step is take care of yourself and make sure you're putting the best foot forward of what you can control around your own site. And that's a great kind of first step.
And I know you mentioned like something that's interesting that has kind of taken the internet, or I guess like the Reddit forums, by storm. I know you mentioned about the robots file, but what about the LLM? How people are saying to create a LLM's text file?
Well, what's interesting about the LLM's text or .txt or text file is that should we do that? And if you look into a research, it's not clear the AI companies are going to adopt it. It's actually a protocol that was suggested by a random tech vendor, and not even like a big website hosting. It didn't come from WordPress. It didn't come from Webflow. It didn't come from Framer. It came from just a random AI company who said, "Hey, we should create a robots.txt equivalent for AI." And so they proposed this LLMs.txt. So it's one of those things that doesn't hurt to do, right? Because it's just a little text file. But at the same time, it's not clear that the LLMs are going to follow it. They haven't said publicly. There's been some rumblings that maybe OpenAI, the parent company of ChatGPT, is going to adopt it. But until that point where it's formally adopted, like the thing about robots.txt is Google has formally adopted that. They have said to the world, we will do this, we will follow this, here's the protocol. And until the AI companies basically say the same thing, we'd actually instead say focus on your robots.txt. The AI companies have said they're going to at least follow that protocol. And so it doesn't hurt to do LLMs.txt, but if you're hiring a vendor because of that, I'm not so sure it's as important as focusing on what we've always been doing in I think in the SEO space around robots.txt. That's kind of, we'd say, step one. LLMs.txt is a maybe, but nobody really knows at this point, because again, it was, if you look it up online, it was proposed by an AI vendor, not one of the big ones. And until the other big ones, again, the OpenAI, the Perplexities, the Anthropics of the world say they're going to follow it. And of course, another big one is Google with their Gemini models. And Google hasn't said they're going to follow it. So I think there's some, I'm not so sold that that's actually one of those things. It's a little bit snake oilish today.
It's more of a industry rumor.
Yeah, it's not necessarily rumor. People talk about it, but I think it's one of these things. And people in my side, right? And Gumshoe as a company is, we're there to help. But fundamentally, how do we help companies understand what AI is saying about them and what to do about it, right? What do you want to call that, AI visibility or something else? And I think, that brands are concerned about how visible they are, and they're trying to do everything they possibly can. They don't want to miss anything as they race into this, because I think we learned the lesson from traditional search. If you waited 5 years or 10 years, you were stuck and way behind. And so everyone's jumping, trying to get ahead and trying to do what they can. And I'm just not sure this is a do what you can, that I wouldn't prioritize an LLM.txt. I'd much more focus on robots.txt and thinking about what's my content strategy, what's my visibility strategy, how do I tell the world who I am and do a better job of communicating with the models in interesting ways.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now, I know you mentioned that like the best way, or one of the best ways to start ranking, is by creating like long form content on your website, and also essentially just answering questions that AI is probably thinking about, right? So when it comes down to that, I also know you mentioned you had some stats perhaps, or maybe even some brand examples of other companies that have improved their website traffic from having this strategy in place.
Yep. And I'll give some good examples here. There's some companies out there that have worked with us, and a couple of different strategies that come up. And I'm in the process of, I'm going to share the screen and show some stats around what the LLMs look for, and I'll be able to speak to some of the techniques that people have used as a result of that to take advantage of AI and its opportunities. So let me share my screen. All right. Hopefully you see there we go. Win. All right. To go back, what I was saying in terms of, you're asking questions about what are people doing and how are they doing well. And what I'm showing you is some data from Gumshoe. And what this is this is data from all users of our platform. And we have thousands of users. I like to say that we're the most popular dedicated AIO app out there, as we close in on over a couple of thousand companies have signed up since we launched earlier this year. And what you're looking at are a couple of things. This first graph is, what are the sites that are getting referred to by AI, by LLMs? And what you're seeing is this chart, and you're seeing business sites and what have you, and then you see e-commerce sites. One of the interesting things that are showing up now are PDPs, FAQs, and resource sections. That's what business content. And what's interesting about that, I was saying earlier that AI search is really trying to solve this problem of canonical information. How many times have you said, I just need to look up like a fact about a product, like how big it is? And you go Google, how big is, what are the dimensions of my TV? Like you want to fit it somewhere. And what all you see is the top 10 X of Y. Like I don't need a dang, blog post or review of whatever Google. I'm just trying to find the size of my new Sony TV. And so it doesn't link to PDPs very well. Like you have to go to page 5 of a Google search to get to that, right? It's how frustrating is that? Whereas with AI, we're seeing that your links to PDPs have doubled since the beginning of the year. So that graph used to be where you see that those bars to the left here, those were about half of what they were just 3 to 4 or 5 months ago. And you see also in e-commerce sites links to product pages as well. So I think that's something else in terms of we're definitely seeing a rise in the interest in PDPs. But the other thing that they're linking to, I was saying earlier about Q&A content, you're seeing a lot of interest in FAQs from the crawlers. Because what they do is they love to see questions and answers because they use that to say, oh, here's a series of questions and answers that I can train on. And so one of the things that we've seen is there's a startup based out of Australia called 𝘄𝗶𝗹𝗹 Health. It's a telehealth service. And what they've done is really invested in Q&A content here. There's over 1,000 FAQ articles that they've generated. And what they've done, so they sort of heard about, oh, if I focus on FAQ content, I can do well. So their startup, they were new. They started doing this just within the last couple of months. And they went from having literally no presence in AI search and traditional search to increasing presence as a result. So they went from 0 to a multiple percentage points within about 6 weeks as a result of focusing on FAQ content. So this has been their primary content strategy. And as you see, and by the way, as you look at this is publicly available, it is 𝘄𝗶𝗹𝗹health.com/resources. And you can see a great example of an FAQ that was able to drive traffic. Now, once, I've talked to some companies and they say, oh, I'll update 2 to 3 articles a month. And we're like, hey, that's not enough. LLMs are ferocious consumers of content. And 2, when you look at AI search and you're trying to understand the topics and questions they want to answer, you want to have content that speaks to every one of those questions that pops up that you might appear in. And so they've developed over 1,000 FAQ articles in just literally a month or 2. And that's been what's really driving their results. And so the other thing that I want to point out here too, as you look at this, is how their FAQs are structured. There's an author, and I'll come back to the value of authors in a second. They love authors, LLMs, because they're trying to figure out who the writer is and do they have credibility. 2, there's a summary, key takeaways. LLMs love when you tell them basically, what's the thing that I should really pay attention to here? They love bullets, right? Summarized information in a logical way. And then they love references. Like, where are you citing this information from? And so this is one of, I think, the best examples of what an FAQ should look like for LLM consumption. So that's one take. So that's a good takeaway here from the stats, which is we know FAQs are cited. We know, in fact, between PDTs and FAQs are the most commonly cited things on LLMs. So from a visibility standpoint, right, the data says you do that first. Now, there's additional sites and information that you can do and think about. And one of the others that shows up here as I'm scrolling down, we're looking at the top domains as referenced by different AI platforms. And the first chart you're looking at is for ChatGPT, which is open to AI. And you see google.com is the most commonly referenced. It's actually not google.com. It's actually maps.google.com. And so they love business profiles. And if you're in a localized business, make sure that your business profiles are updated on Google Maps. And also make sure it's got you can add key facts and interest to it, right? So one of the things that you want that platforms like ours help you do are what are the key pieces of information that the crawlers are looking for? And so that's a piece of information that you can do. You also see here that as I scroll down, people are like, well, I heard that they often include Reddit. And Google does have a lot of Reddit information. And so we start thinking about what can I do offsite? Reddit and YouTube. This is for Gemini 1.5, which is 2 generations ago. It's 2.5 is the most common and up to date. You'll see even as Google, they've turned down Reddit a little bit. It's no longer number one. It's now number 4 or 5, depending upon whether it's Gemini 2.0 or 2.5. We still see YouTube as number one. And the next one is Perplexity. Is look at the dominance of YouTube in Perplexity. And so one of the things we like to point out here is that the point about YouTube being so popular, our point of view is it's not ASR, meaning automated speech recognition. What we believe is it's transcripts, and that the crawlers love to consume the transcripts. And what they also do is they love to consume sites that are easily formatted for LLM crawler consumption. And so who else other than Google probably knows how to format information for crawlers? And so Google Maps and YouTube are incredibly popular with the LLMs. Yes, they have a lot of good information, but two, they are probably examples of the 2 best domains for LLM consumption. And so if your site is easy to crawl, it's formatted in a way that LLMs like, the schema is correct, that they love, there's this a JSON format that they love, JSON.LD. So you want to make sure your information, your website's coded with that, you'll get rewarded. And that's what you're seeing here is there's great examples that you can do, which is to say, great, if I make my site more easily read by AI crawlers, you will absolutely see your crawler rates increase and you'll see more visibility. And I think that's one of the lessons here. So we see that sort of universally going back. We say it's not about LLMs.txt. It's about, is your site actually formatted well and correctly? And I think that's kind of one of the key things here as you think about that. Now, one of the things I wanted to scroll down here is we also look up the traditional search rank of the cited URLs by LLMs. And that's what this is. And one of the things, there's tons of debate, right, that's come up about, oh, I read that ChatGPT is just crawling Bing or Google. Used to be Bing, seems to be Google now. And they're just, so if I just do SEO, traditional SEO, I'm fine. Well, what people just get lost, and there's a subtle thing that they miss that this chart shows. And this is, again, the traditional search rank of those listings. And you see here, 20 plus is the most common, from just under 50% to almost 90% of links cited by LLMs have as Google traditional search rank higher than 20, meaning page 2 and beyond. They're deep links. So people are like, oh, I just have to show up and do SEO, and I'm the top link in Google, I'll get picked up by the LLMs. That's not true. Here's the data that says that. Now, what people miss is, yes, the LLMs do look things up in Google's index. But what people stop, they say, oh, do they, like humans, we stop at page 1, right? How many people click to page 2 in Google search? Like, you're smiling as well, like not many, right?
Yep.
So, but the crawlers have infinite attention span. So they keep going. They go to page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. And so what's interesting about that is that they're citing these long tail writers and piece of content. So yeah, you can say they're crawling Google, but it being top at Google doesn't mean you're going to get picked as the top answer or reference in an LLM's answer. And so what's interesting about that is that what our data says in terms of, well, who are those long tail links, is what we tend to find is they're heavily credentialed writers. There's a lot of independent writers out there who have what we call knowledge authority. And so what they're doing is that if you have knowledge authority, meaning do you have academic credentials? They love academic credentials. NGO status, like they love NGOs because they're independent. And if you're an industry expert, you have industry awards and credentials. So what they want to see is they like writers that are credentialed with bios online. So going back to the 𝘄𝗵𝗶𝗀 health example, I'm gonna point something out. How many times have you seen the writer of an FAQ? Like never, right?
Yeah.
You never see that. But notice they put that here. That Sina is actually the founder of 𝘄𝗵𝗶𝗀 Health. Notice she's putting where she went to med school, academic credential. Notice she's got her industry titles, right? Here it is. And so this is a great example of the types of things you should be doing, which is, it's no longer the FAQ of yesterday that matters. It's the FAQ of sort of tomorrow, that you want to start doing. So they were able to leverage her and her background. But the other thing that we've seen, another example, is there's a company based in Seattle that focuses on immigration services. They help like tech companies get H-1B visas. And so what they did, going back to this long tail example, is they recruited some of these long tail writers to create an authors panel on their site. And so what's great about LLMs is that because they started writing blog posts, they had bylines, the same bylines, they had the same bios that they had on their independent sites. And LLMs are smart enough to pick that up. They can conflate the same person in two different places. And so as a result of that, they started producing content on their site from these authors. And so what they started to see is that instead of the authors' smaller domains getting traffic or getting references, they started seeing themselves get mentioned in those AI answers. And so within 90 days, they saw their traffic increase from LLMs 5x.
Wow.
Because the LLMs are smart enough to figure out authors. So here's a key point. What that tells you is that it's no longer about domain authority. Right? When I mentioned, that's why I use the term knowledge authority. They're much more, they're smart enough to figure out it's the author, not the domain that matters. And I think that's another key thing that pops up, which is domain authority is not the same as it is in traditional search with AI search. I think this is the type of thing that is really fascinating to kind of point to, which is, oh, if I'm trying to develop this earned media strategy, right, this outreach strategy, I can just recruit some of these writers into my own domain. So that's kind of one of those fascinating changes. Yes, OpenAI might have crawled Google's index, but they didn't stop at page 1. And they're highlighting these long tail writers. And I think this is really one of the interesting things that pops up as a result. So this next chart, and it kind of speaks to the prior point and even the Eureka Health example. This next chart is looking at, well, the publishing date of content referenced by the LLMs. And this is a histogram. So that big spike means that most of the content they're referencing was published recently. And so that's what this chart is showing. And so what the stats say is that over 50% of the content referenced by the LLMs was published in the last 90 days. Right? Traditional SEO, it was like fine wine. It wanted it to ruminate. It wanted to air out. It liked things that had been around for a while. Like I remember reading the set, like 1 to 2 years was kind of the sweet spot for SEO, which made it kind of a problem because if you wanted to do something, it was like, well, I had to like plant a tree and wait 5 years for it to produce fruit, right? And it might or might not pay off. I think it was always one of the traditional challenges with SEO. But with LLMs, today is what matters. And going back to, remember I mentioned the real-time internet search aspect of LLMs.
Yes.
When they launched real-time internet search and they lost the look back, the challenge of being 12 to 18 months out of date, they completely swung the other way and are really focused on recency. And I think this is one of the interesting things. And going back to the Eureka Health example, which is, right, they're publishing a ton of content within a very short amount of time, like 1,000 FAQs in a month. Well, this is why, right? You have to publish quickly, you have to publish frequently, and you will start to see the results start to show. And so I think these are other examples of what do you need to do to really do well. And publishing frequently and often is one of the outcomes of that. And I think that's one of the interesting aspects that we're showing is it's going to be way more of an arms race in terms of publishing than it ever was. But the good news is, unlike Google, right, which struggled, SEO bait, like you lose your traffic, you lose domain authority, you lose, kind of keyword authority around key terms to these SEO baiters, these content publishers. But what's great about AI search is it is truly trying to solve the canonical information problem. And so PDPs get picked up, your FAQs get picked up. It wants to cite the real source. And it is, by being canonically correct, it's solving the problems of search. So I think that's kind of one of the interesting things, and why is AI search better, is it can handle complex queries. It can figure out what's the actual canonical source of information. And so as a business, your job is to be, how do I establish myself as the canonical source for me and my products and services? And some of the content you can do. And yes, you still want to right? You're still going to be doing earned media that still has value. Those long tail writers, especially if they have, so it's not about are they on page one of Google anymore if you want to do outreach. It's more, can you find the ones that have knowledge authority and leverage them in their background. And so that's how we like to think about AI search and some of the things like, why are people doing things? And this data is kind of what's behind that information. And how do you do that? And so I think this is, and the public can see this is research0.gumshoe.ai. We'll provide the link, and you can see this information publicly and use this to help inform your strategies to how you think about visibility and how do I improve it and what I should be doing.
This is really, really insightful. And I have two quick questions around this. So in the very last graph that you shared,
Yes.
right, how everything is referencing timely data. Is that why in the Eureka Health FAQ it said published July 25th?
Correct.
Updated
Great call out to that. That's absolutely. So you should be putting the publishing dates on your content, right? You didn't have to with Google. Traditional SEO didn't care about that, but LLMs do. And I think that's kind of fascinating, right? So you want to put the publishing date. By the way, you can republish information, right? Because effectively what the LLMs are saying is like, and the recency makes sense, right? I'm trying to get the most canonically correct information. What's more likely correct? The most up-to-date version of that information. Mm-hmm. So even if you put it like published or put, the date and updated afterwards, right, to human consumption of that, that's fine. They just want to make sure someone checked it, someone verified it, finally republished it. And so these are some of the hacks that have come out. And so I think these are things you can be doing. But yes, that's a great observation, because you're right. Most people don't normally do that when they're publishing FAQs.
Yeah, that was interesting. And then so we referenced a lot about like what people should do on their websites, but do you think that creating like third-party content on like LinkedIn or Reddit or anything like that, do you think that that's also going to enhance their visibility?
It will. And going back to the chart that showed Reddit is a popular subdomain, or popular domain, and then right, there are specific threads. So you should be encouraging that. And as a brand, you can participate in that. One of the things that platforms like ours help do is surface those Reddit threads. That often comes up is like, Todd, I need someone to help me find the damn Reddit threads I need to care about. Because there's so many. Obviously, it's hard. And which ones are important and not. And then we're helping to identify that. And then part of as a platform, what we're helping do, which is how do you help brands identify the content and the things they need to be saying in those posts. And so that's one of the things that, in terms of like we're building as a feature, is the ability to, here's the types of things you should be saying in those forums. Here's the information that the LLMs are looking for. And so yes, those are absolutely valuable. To your point, step one, start with yourself, look in the mirror, look at your own site, make sure it's crawlable by the LLMs, right? Make sure that starting with robots.txt, make sure you're not blocking their crawlers. 2, make sure your site's formatted well for the LLMs if it's hard for them to understand. Because the thing about them is, and when I say that is, the LLMs, when they answer questions, it's expensive for them. We're hearing about using electricity to answer questions. They literally track how much does it cost me to answer a question, and you'll see the variability in answers. Like if you have a free versus a paid account, you get a different answer to the LLMs. You get kind of a wimpy answer if it's a free account versus if you're paying to get a fuller answer, because they track how much CPU time, basically how much electricity are they consuming to answer your question. And if you make the LLM's job harder, meaning it takes them more energy, more CPU time to process your site, well, you're going to only show up in the most expensive, the most expensive tiers of their services. And so make their jobs easier and they'll reward you, right? Make it easier to consume your content, your information, and what have you. And I think that's one of the things like, why? Well, they got costs. They do this. Like, for instance, I've seen some great charts around, I'm seeing Wikipedia get referenced a lot. And if you look at our data, Wikipedia wasn't one of those top sites you saw. And you're like, that's interesting. Well, the reason is when we're working with the LLMs, we go in as a logged in user, right? That's the representation that we have and the way we work with them. And Wikipedia I like to say, is the easy answer for free accounts. And for paid accounts, what they're really doing is they're looking at Wikipedia, and then they're actually going to the sources behind Wikipedia. And the free accounts are getting like the quick and easy answer. Yeah, I just stopped at Wikipedia, like you could yourself. But the paid answers are, they go to the actual sources, they process those, they're giving you the real answer. And so that's sort of what you see. Great example when you see these stats is like when you see Wikipedia listed as a top domain, you're like, well, oh, I see, that service just stopped at the free easy stuff and didn't really dive into the model's expensive, because it's more expensive for us to query the LLMs in as well. And so that kind of tells you which vendors are actually taking the expense to dive into what the LLMs are really doing versus kind of just taking the quick and easy answer on the other side. So that's another quick little way to judge different players in the space.
That's so fascinating. Wow, you were very, very insightful. I guess let me ask you this question now in regards to, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about like the future of SEO, but what about traditional SEO? Do you think that that is still relevant? Do you think brands should still keep investing into their SEO strategy?
So Google still gets traffic. So I think there's something to be said. And I think, one of the things that, and I'll share my screen again, and because I want to, it'll give me a chance to kind of demo the site, which you see a little bit as well as I pull it up. Here we go. So what you're looking at is, this is a report that was run for Lululemon. And it starts with the first stat you see is brand visibility. And what that is the percent of answers that your company was mentioned in. And one of the things that really is important for LLMs, and as I scroll down here, you're looking at the personas and the differences. And so one of the biggest things about LLMs is how they try to personalize for you, the end user. Like, Isabel, you'll get different answers than I'll get. Right? We're two different people. And the analogy I like to use is the right way to think about LLMs is, imagine there's a shoe store and there's a salesperson at the front of the shoe store. And behind her are 500 pairs of shoes. You walk in the shoe store and you say, great, I need a new pair of shoes. And would she give you the same pair of shoes as me? Probably not. Like, you have different interests, you have different styles. You might be into walking at the beach, and I'm interested in hiking in the mountains. You need different pairs of shoes, like flip-flops for the beach and hiking shoes for the mountains. Well, therefore, you'd get different answers, right? And so the way that we believe that the LLMs handle personalization is through this idea of personas. Like, when you create the registered account, like, go ask, if you have a registered account, go ask like ChatGPT what it knows about you. You'd be shocked. It knows where you work, it knows where you went to school, it knows like how many kids you have, it knows everything about you. It looks you up. The minute you register, it's looking you up and building a profile. So it can answer your questions better. And one of the fascinating things here, and I want to point out, is, so you see these are different target personas for this brand. And we generated these personas ourselves. And look at the difference. Look at how one persona only has a 12% AI visibility rate with answers, right? Versus some of the other ones that have 89%. That's a huge swing. And so I think that's one of the most fascinating things about SEO is that, well, what do you mean for SEO? Do you mean SEO for the sustainable fitness advocate, or you mean SEO for the corporate wellness warrior? And so I think that the idea of personas and targeting individual users was not something, because Google didn't really personalize the search that much, like just a tiny little bit from you or me if you had a registered Google account. But with AI search, there are absolutely just vast swings. And so it doesn't hurt to do traditional SEO. But if you don't take the extra steps to think about these, like, what's unique about AI search and how do I optimize for that? Right? So I think they are going to be different things, and you're going to have to think about it differently. It's not just a one size fits all strategy now. It's going to be much more of a strategy around, oh, how do I think about really coming up with telling the LLMs, like, well, for Isabel, here's the types of shoes that make sense, and then for Todd, here's the types of shoes that make sense. And so it's not I'd say it's not SEO or bust, it's SEO but, meaning, yeah, great, continue to do SEO, it doesn't hurt, it's helpful. Google's still a giant behemoth, but as I plan for the future in AI, these are some of the things you have to think about. And so that's kind of where we're pushing, which is, well, how do we really think about personalization? And then it's much more of like this chart here, which shows the crosstabs of persona versus topic. And how do I help identify what's really the right areas I need to focus on, right? And so that you see here, it's not bolded. That's, there's some challenges there. I'm not the one getting referenced. What do I have to do? But if I just did a general, I'm number one, I'm 70%, right? Going back to the top, I would miss this level of detail. And I think that's the other thing is AI optimization is going to be a way more granular approach. Again, one size fits all doesn't work anymore, and so it's going to have to change, right? So it's going to be SEO but, right, versus SEO or, I think, is going to be the right way to think about that and what we should be doing and maximizing more. So anyways, this is the type of information that you'll see and get access to our site. Also, another thing is look at the difference in models. People are like, oh, they're all the same, right? In Grok 2, Lululemon has got an 87% mention rate across all the personas, but in Perplexity, which is very much heavily investing in shopping, right? That's kind of what they're going to be focused on, is how do I enable like their new browser, Perplexity Comet launch. It's starting to launch this idea of an agentic shopper, right? A personalized shopper for you. And they only have a 50% mention rate with Perplexity. Oh boy. So this granularity is just like, there are vast differences between models, between personas, between topics, and you have to kind of capture all of that now. So suddenly, if you're the person in charge of SEO or content and marketing, your job, there's a lot more work to be done. Now, the good news is, again, tools like ours, we have generative capabilities. We're going to help you. How do I then create content to target all of that? Todd, I don't have 50 writers. Again, you're going to have to rely on generative AI to do that, and generative content, because we're not going to be able to do that in a timely manner. But this is the type of things that start to show up, is like this. And I think people are surprised when they look at these stats, the difference between the different models. Holy crap. Like, I could be winning. I've won. I'm number one. I'm 87% in one. You're 50% in the other. Uh-oh. Right? So I think this is the type of things that start to really appear, which is my work. If I'm in charge of this, right? If you're a traditional SEO person, I just probably increased your workload 10x. Oh boy.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and I've actually experienced this one firsthand. Some people have reached out to me from Grok, and they're like, I found you on Grok, and I'm like, well, that's cool.
Yeah, and it's different. I think people are shocked at the differences. And by the way, the AI companies, the model companies, I'm convinced, are looking at these stats, because even if you look at the ChatGPT or Gemini 1.5 versus 2.0 versus 2.5, they're like, you see different visibility rates dramatically between the different models, even in the same company. Like, they're actively tuning every time they roll a new model. Think about it like a new car model. Like, one's tuned for, as a sports car, the other one's tuned as an off-roader, the other one, right? So it's really interesting to see these differences emerge. And as a marketer, none of them have super dominant market share. So now I've got to pay attention to it all. So again, and going back to the analogy of the LLMs, the way we like to think about it, going back to that salesperson, is unlike traditional SEO, which was very technical, right? It's all about link structure, and you had to like build links a very certain way because Google's crawler could only understand things that was done a very specific way, which was annoying, I think, to all of us as heck. Like, it was beyond frustrating. Like, the whole debate, oh, should it be a subdomain or a folder? Like, how many years did we debate that? And it was like a religious debate, right? Protestantism versus Catholicism. Like, some people were subdomain camp. Like, it was funny. Like, think amount of conference time and attention that was dedicated to that, like, super arcane kind of concept. And I think with LLMs, it's less about the arcane technical things. Again, make the job easier for the models, right? So I was saying earlier, they like that, but it's not required. But think about, and it's like that salesperson now at the front of the store, where I need to train her, I need to inform her, I need to say, like, here's why my products are better. So we have a content strategy and FAQs. It's like, if you were in the retail world and you've ever held a training for a salesperson, right? What do? You're saying, oh, here's the questions you're going to get my products, and here's the suggested answers. That's kind of what the FAQ, right, is. And so that's kind of the point, is treat the LLM as your channel salesperson out there in the world. And I need to train that person, and I need to help them, and I need to arm them with the facts so they pick my product versus another product. That's the right way to think about LLMs. We no longer have to be this weird technical in the basement of the company person, like magically coding things in a certain way to get picked up by the Google crawler. Now we can sort of be human again and be like, I can talk like a real person. And that's, to us, what is really, what AIO is about, AI optimization. It's about, how do I communicate to the models in a way that they understand and that they can represent me to the public.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I guess leading into Google, right? Google also launched their AI overviews and their AI mode. And, this is probably going to lead to an even further significant decline in clicks. What do you think marketers should do about that? Like, is it the same methodology that we just talked about, or should there be like a different strategy for this?
It's a great question about the decline of traffic and what does it mean and its impact. And if I'm a content publisher, an information publisher, your business is likely going to fundamentally change. But if I'm selling products and services, AI is like in AI search is the best thing that ever happened. And what we're seeing is that you're getting less, even those product companies are getting less traffic than they used to. But there's a big important but. But what we're seeing is the conversion rates on that traffic. I might get less traffic, but my conversion rates are dramatically higher, which makes sense. AI is answering questions, it's moving people down the funnel. And so the stats that we're hearing on the consumer side, the B2C side, is that AI traffic converts about 2.5 to 5x better.
Whoa.
But for B2B, it converts like 5x to as high. This one stat we heard is 23x better. So even if I'm only getting, if I get 1/20th the amount of traffic from that I used to get, but it converts at 20x better, I'm kind of neutral. And so what we're seeing is, and some of the best businesses are seeing 5-10% of their traffic now coming from AI, especially enterprise folks. AI search is like the best thing that ever happened to you because those conversion rates are through the roof, right? If I'm getting 10% of my traffic now and it converts 20x better, I'm net ahead. So that's what's really driving a lot of interest. What's also fascinating about people are like, oh, it's just a B2C thing. Actually, I think the use case in B2B is almost even better because think about traditional like B2B searches. They're long, they're complex. Google didn't handle them as well. AI search is a much better use case for complex topics. So I think for anything who's selling in the enterprise space or the B2B space, AI search is going to crush for you. And you want as much of that traffic. And also the other problem with B2B is paid, and it was always a bit of a challenge. It was hard to target people. They're just not enough of them. And so I think what's interesting is B2B has been investing in content marketing for much more heavily and longer than even B2C because that's been the bread and butter of their business, like white papers, long scale articles. You have to do more, and that's the type of information that LLMs love. So I think there's this real interesting dynamic where I think B2B could be leading the AI optimization, the AI search charge, because that's been their bread and butter. Again, what the LLMs love is long form informative content. You've been doing that as part of B2B and content marketing for a long time. And so in many ways, I'm like, you B2B marketers, content marketers, now is your time. AI search is going to love you and it's going to make your businesses better and get as much of that traffic as you possibly can.
That is really fascinating. What do you think, like moving forward, what do you think are some maybe like skills or mindset shifts that marketers should focus on for the next 5 or 6 months to keep up with all these changes?
I think that the biggest thing is you're going to have to pay attention to the news and facts. And right, Isabel, you're seeing things you haven't seen before. Like, crap, what is it? I'm getting raw traffic. They just launched that. Geez, what's going on? And I think so. I think that's one thing is make sure little tactical things you can be doing, which is you're going to have to pay attention to the news, right? Isabel, you're an active, a writer in the space, and people like you and are seeing these changes and talking about that. So I think that's step one is you're going to have to pay attention to things that are going on because it's happening quickly. Like your Perplexity rolling out its browser, its agentic browser. You've got OpenAI rolling out its agents. Like you're probably seeing news around how OpenAI for ChatGPT is now talking about building in shopping cart functionality directly into the model. So transactions could be shifting away from your site into these other platforms. So pay attention to the news. It's going to be fast and furious. And I think the second thing is like little things like make sure your GA4 is set up to track the AI crawlers. You can see they're in there, or upload your web blogs to like 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀, and you can filter for the AI crawlers. Like see how much traffic you're getting. Like set that baseline. And you don't need a third-party tool to do this. You can track this through GA4 or look at your web blogs. And you can there's some great content out there about how to upload them to 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀 and filter out for the LLM crawlers. But they're all visible in those platforms. So build a baseline of what your LLM traffic is, right? Track that over time. And then 3, you're going to have to start paying attention to what are the models saying about you. And the good news is there's services like ours. Ours is, if, for instance, you can sign up for free. You don't need to pay us anything or whatever, and you can get kind of a good baseline. We're going to maintain, some baseline functionality for free for forever. So as an example, if you can find services that can help that. You can obviously log in on your own, but the problem with when you log in on your own is kind of a fun fact. So if you pay attention to this, you'll see memes around how like ChatGPT is a sycophant. Like it is literally designed to flatter you. to make you feel good. It wants you to come back. So anything you're associated with, it will say is great, like the Lego movie. Everything is awesome, right? When you log into ChatGPT, if you've logged in yourself, everything affiliated with you will be awesome. And but the problem is that's not what it's saying to the real world. So you're likely going to need a tool like ours to go kind of figure out as a baseline. But I think the biggest thing you can do is figure out that baseline. Where are you today? You've got a little bit of window, and you're producing great content. If you're doing, you can continue to do that. Don't worry, you're not doing anything wrong. The optimization can come. The good news is when you finally are ready to really invest in it, it can have an immediate impact. So that's good. But pay attention, start planning ahead, build that baseline, and start building that corpus of knowledge. I think is do that in the next 6 months, and I think that's a great starting point for as this world evolves. And I think the biggest change is yet to come, meaning agentic actions. When the LLM will, which is just a fancy way of saying that the LLMs will complete tasks for its users. And when that starts to happen, when it starts registering, signing up for services, when it starts buying things for you, that shift is probably the biggest dramatic shift that really will occur. Is suddenly you're going to have to care about LLMs completing tasks, and then the LLM becomes your customer. And how do you market to that? Which is a world that we're all going to have to figure out. Thankfully, it's a little bit down the road, but it's coming fast and furiously. But I think that's the shift after this baseline that you really want to pay attention to is, am I going to start seeing agentic actions within my site when that day starts happening? But if you get GA4 set up correctly, you'll be okay. You'll start to see this happening. That'll be a big day and a big shift. But I think for today and the next 6 months, just figure out that baseline. That's a good first step. Start paying attention, and you'll be ready for even bigger shifts down the road.
Wow. Yeah, that's really smart. So, well, I think other than that, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience that we may have missed?
I think the biggest things are that AI is fun. The good news is that if you're the CMO listening here, your brethren are all in the same space. This is probably one of the most important topics that they're talking about and thinking about. And if you've been doing content or SEO within a team, now is your day. You are going to be the most popular person to that CMO, and you equip yourself, with answers. No pun intended necessarily, right? But be ready to answer those questions. Your execs are interested in what you're focusing on. Learn as much as you can about AI. Start paying attention to people like you, 𝗲𝗹𝗹, who are really writing about this and talking about it, because it is your chance to get in front of that executive leadership. And because it's really, every board is asking their head of marketing, what's our AI strategy? And so I think that's probably the biggest one. Is it's those of you who can really step up and answer that question and really help inform that, really have an opportunity, I think, to do something fun and interesting. I think we're all fascinated with what's happening with AI. And also, it's a great chance to really shine in your career. AI is going to be probably the number one, marketing topics and concerns and interests for the next 12 to 18 months.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really, really awesome conversation, and it's very refreshing to speak to experts that are very passionate about their work. So I wanted to thank you for being here. And before we go, maybe if you could share, where can people find you, connect with you? Where can they find Gumshoe?
Yep. So great. So you can find me on Twitter, X, whatever you're going to call it. My handle is @𝘁𝗶𝗶𝘀. You can also find us on LinkedIn. Anyone who's listening, more than welcome to connect with me. Please do. I'm very open to those sort of things. And then you can find us at Gumshoe at 𝗏𝗏𝗏.ai online.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, everybody. And I'll see you on the next episode.